So as soon as that engine moved, it would click a timer.
Okay, everyone. It is now 6:30, and I call the order to this meeting of the Lincoln County Planning Commission. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. The order of events tonight will be as follows. For each public hearing, staff will introduce the agenda item and present a summary of the staff report. The applicant will then be asked to explain their proposal in further detail and to answer any questions from the Planning Commission members. I will then open the floor to public comment, first for the persons in support of the application, and then for persons in opposition of the application. When you step up to the podium, please state your name and address and speak into the microphone. Each speaker will have the chance to speak once and should keep their comments to less than 5 minutes. Speakers are encouraged to only address new and relevant information pertaining to the item. Above all, please be cordial to all meeting participants and refrain from side conversations and speaking out of turn, or you will be asked to leave. Lastly, decisions on rezoning applications will be scheduled for an additional public hearing during an upcoming County Board of Commissioners. Decisions on conditional use permit applications may be appealed to the County Board of Commissioners by submitting a letter to the County Planning and Zoning Office within 5 business days. Oh, where's my agenda? I thought I brought an agenda up here. Where did it go? Here we go. All right. I will call the meeting to order. And I will do a roll call. Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner Jungling.
Here.
Commissioner Instead.
Here.
Commissioner Green.
Here.
Commissioner Scott.
Here.
And Commissioner Landine.
Here.
Okay, and do approval of the meeting minutes for the March 20th meeting. Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve, Green.
Second, Jungling.
We have a motion and a second for approval of the meeting minutes from March 20th. I will do a roll call. Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Jungling.
Yes.
Commissioner Instead.
Yes.
Commissioner Green.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes.
And Commissioner Hogan is a yes. Can I get a motion for the approval of the meeting agenda for this evening?
Madam Chairman, I move to approve the agenda. Johnson?
Second instead.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Roll call. Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Jungling.
Yes.
Commissioner Instead.
Yes.
Commissioner Green.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes.
And Commissioner Hogan is a yes. At this time, I will ask for public input on non-agenda items. Seeing none, I will move on to old business. Toby?
No old business, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right, moving on, we will move on to the public hearings.
Good evening. Toby Brown, representing County Planning. This first item under public hearing is an application to rezone from the A1 Agricultural District to the RR Rural Residential District. The applicant for this item is Trevor Pierce. Location of this property is approximately a little over a mile to the northeast of the city of Lenox. Comprehensive plan identifies the subject property as future agricultural area. Subject property is currently a 10-acre parcel. The applicant is proposing to subdivide the property in approximately 2 5-acre splits. The current, as I mentioned, the current zoning of the property is A1 agricultural, and the property has not been improved. As I mentioned, the applicant is proposing to subdivide the property into 2 5-acre splits. The property, as 10 acres, did have assigned 1 building eligibility. The applicant is proposing to put that building eligibility or building right on Tract 1B and then rezone Tract 1A to rural residential to allow the construction of a single-family dwelling on that portion of property. So staff did accept the application, did review the application, which is in the accompanying staff report. Staff did identify the future land use map of the comprehensive plan identifies this as a future agricultural parcel. Second to that is that the comprehensive plan encourages density zoning. Since 1995, zoning ordinance in Lincoln County We have restricted building eligibility or building rights to 1 per quarter. This would exceed that requirement. So with that analysis, staff did determine that this application is not in conformance with the zoning ordinance or the comprehensive plan, and therefore does recommend denial of this application. I should have mentioned also that this property is currently under the subdivision authority of the city of Lenox. That's why there's no plat before you tonight. The city of Lenox has a responsibility to subdivide that. Had some discussions with city staff. City staff is here tonight as well about the process would be for that, but ultimately they can address that tonight. But with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have for staff on this item. Okay, thank you.
I could have the applicant now come forward to the podium and explain what they'd like to do.
Basically, just what he said.
Can we just get your name and address, please?
Trevor Pierce, 46703 Snowberry Street, Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Basically, what he said, just trying to get another building eligibility, so we can build 2 separate houses on each of the 5 acres, if accepted.
Do you have any questions? Questions, anybody? No? Okay,
I guess I'd, how long have you had the property, Mr. Pierce?
I just purchased it, be last month or 2 months ago.
Just the 10 acres?
Yep.
So at that point, were you aware that you just had one housing eligibility?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
any other questions, Commission? Okay, all right, thank you. I will now open the floor for those in favor of the application. Seeing none, I will open the floor for those in opposition.
Good evening, Commissioners. Nate Vanderplot, City Administrator for the City of Lenox, 107 South Main Street in Lenox. The City of Lenox is opposed to this application for a number of reasons. I'm not going to read through all the comprehensive plan reasons on the part of the City of Lenox, but certainly not in compliance with our plans in terms of discouraging spot zoning, discouraging growth in areas not suitable for sewer, and it's against the orderly transition of agricultural areas. But, looking further at this, it's clear that there's simply an attempt here to create a new building eligibility that does not already exist. And that's simply an attempt to go around the existing ordinances of the county, as well as the comprehensive plan of Lenox and Lincoln County. So we urge your denial of this application.
Thank you.
Chris Clemmy, 27701, Lenox, South Dakota.
Okay.
As someone that lives in the area, I purchased a plot of land near this less than 18 months ago. Same, and I think it's unfair to all the people in the area that have bought land in the area to basically make more eligibilities. Otherwise, you should allow more eligibilities for like me. Like I have enough land to build another house. What is stopping me from basically plotting my land and putting another house on it or selling it for profit? I would like to do that as well.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
Mike Fuddis, 46689. Same thing as Chris. I live in the area, and some concerns that I have, from what I've heard, this is the first time that this would be passed for something like this. Another eligibility. So we bought our land with the intention of having 4 acres to be on 4 acres. And my fear is that moving forward, that if this is approved, that where does it stop? I guess with eligibilities being bought up 10 acres at a time and then divided down to sell for profit or for whatever reason it is. So Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, may I add my comments? My apologies. Nate Vanderplatz with the City of Lennox again. Toby mentioned that this property has not yet been platted. It is under the platting jurisdiction of the City of Lennox. Because of these issues, the city's unlikely to plat this property or approve this plat in the first place, and that's been provided as feedback to the engineer and surveyor for this property.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. I will close the floor at this time for public comment. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to deny the application. Green.
Second instead.
All right, there's a motion and a second to deny. Any discussion?
I would just say, yeah, these are the rules we followed in the past. It's in our rules right now, and I'm not going to support I'll support the denial. That's what I'm going to say.
I agree with Commissioner Jungling, and this has been a topic that we've discussed at length over, for sure, the past year and a half, and the whole housing eligibility thing, and this is a creative way to try to get some more for sure. But yeah, I'm 100% against it, and will support the denial.
Madam Chairman, I hope this is something that we maybe look to address in the next comprehensive plan because whereas the applicant did, have we do have rural residential zoning, we have approved it in the past. I know that's not been we haven't approved very many of them, but probably something we need to take a deeper look at when we do the new comprehensive plan.
Commissioner Scott? I agree wholeheartedly. I will not support this. I will support the denial. This is a touchy subject for us, and we have worked hard on trying to get these under control, so I will support the denial of this. Any other comments? Okay, I will do roll call for the denial of this application. Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jongling,
Yes.
Commissioner Anstead,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine,
Yes.
and Commissioner Hogan is a yes. So that is denied. And our next item, Toby?
This second item under public hearings is an application for a conditional use to amend an existing conditional use permit. The applicant for this item is Mike Mechtenberg. The property owner is I-29 Storage LLC. Location of this property is approximately a mile west of the city of Worthing. Subject property is Zone C commercial, as is adjacent parcels. The adjacent parcel to the west is a much larger, what I call an agricultural parcel. Subject property is improved with 2 storage units totaling approximately 30,000 square feet. The application did identify the existing conditional use permit that's on the property limits the square footage of the total property, and the applicant is requesting to increase the total square footage on the property by about 3,500 square feet, or 3,525 square feet. The staff did accept the application, and the staff analysis identified specifically that there are 2 conditions, or 3 conditions in the existing conditional use permit that would be in conflict with the application. The first being the conditional use permit would be the current conditional use permit. The second would be there was a site plan that was approved with the conditional use permit of October 4th of 2019. We would amend that to December 2nd. And then the third point would be instead of 50,475 square feet, it would be amended to 54,000 square feet. So staff did do a full analysis of this, even though this is essentially just an amendment of an existing conditional use permit. Identified that this area is primarily a commercial industrial type area, and that this use expanding by an additional approximately 3,000 square feet should have no negative impact on adjacent properties. So staff does feel that this application is consistent with the Code of Ordinances and the comprehensive plan, does recommend approval with the 5 conditions that were listed in the staff report. And again, the first 3 would be amended to reflect the increase in the total square footage. With that, we'd have to answer your questions that you have for staff.
Mr. Brown?
Yep.
Is there still the condition of no outside storage? Is that just because of the commercial? Is that,
Correct.
okay, so we don't need to have a conditional or a condition on it because it's in the ordinance?
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, if I can have the applicant come forward, explain what he would like to do.
Mike Mechtenberg, 24687 478th Avenue, Del Rapids, South Dakota.
Brian Pearson, 6509 South Jeffrey, Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Okay? You just want to add on?
Yeah, we're just, we've already built 40 units out there with the square footage that was approved, and we had been approved previously for 3 additional buildings, and we changed the design slightly to be 2 buildings rather than 3. And the redesign would accommodate another, 3,000 square feet. And so that's really all we're asking to do. And then we have very nice units. They've been good renters, and we have a nice, clean site. And we're full right now, so we just want to expand it.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for them? Questions? Okay. All right. At this time, I will ask for comments for anybody in favor of the application. Seeing none, I will ask for those in opposition of the application. Okay, I will now close the floor to public comment. Is there a motion?
Madam Chairman, I move to approve the conditional use permit with the conditions and findings. Johnson?
Second, Scott.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. Any discussion?
No, all I have to say is, this is the right area, the right environment, and how we're trying to grow the county in the right way, and this is a good spot for it.
Yep.
Concur.
Makes our decisions easier.
And it is clean. It looks really good. Good job.
Any others? Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve. I will now do roll call. Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jungling,
Yes.
Commissioner Instead,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine,
Yes.
and Commissioner Hogan is a yes. So the motion passes. You are approved. Thank you. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to get some folks online. Just one moment, everyone. Okay, we got them all.
Good afternoon. Bill Golden. I'm with the State's Attorney's Office, and we're here to request an executive session prior to the pipeline hearing.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to move into executive session.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to go into executive session. Roll call. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
Commissioner Jungling?
Yes.
Commissioner Instead,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine,
Yes.
Commissioner Hogan is a yes.
And that was under potential litigation.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to make a motion to bring us back from executive session.
Second, Jungling? Or, yeah, first
Asking for a
motion.
motion, is that what we're doing?
Yes.
So move, Green.
Is there a second? Who's the second?
Jungling, second.
All right. I'll do a roll call. Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Commissioner Jungling,
Yes.
Commissioner Instead,
Yes.
Commissioner Green,
Yes.
Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Landine.
Yes.
And Commissioner Hogan is a yes. All right. Mr. Golden.
Thank you. The ordinance previously was recommended up to the commission. The commission has sent it back because on its face, there are several drafting errors. I mean, just one of the easy ones is there's a statute in there that doesn't exist. The way this works is that the commission can either vote yes, no, or to send it back to this board to modify and change the ordinance in order to fix some of these drafting errors and problems. I think we've identified multiple drafting errors in the ordinance that we've shown to you. We've also pointed out and given you an outline of different areas in which the Planning and Zoning Committee needs to look at it, make some changes, or make some choices on how to go forward. There's currently 2 lawsuits going on over in Iowa. There's a federal judge who has heard this matter that's very similar to our ordinance and is preparing to rule. That judge tipped their hand in a big way in telling the proponents there that if the ordinance was about safety, then it was going to be preempted by the federal government. So that's one of the things that you need to take a look at, and one of the things you need to work on in order to fashion an ordinance that can survive and be defended. So the recommendation would be that you form a committee to work on the drafting of this ordinance and to fix the different issues and problems that we've already pointed out that are drafting errors, and then bring it back in front of the Planning and Zoning Committee. Do you have any questions?
Anybody? Okay. Okay. Toby, did you have anything you want to say, or should we move forward with public comment?
No, I have no comments.
Okay. All right, at this time, I'm going to open the floor for those in favor of the application. I just want to remind everybody that you try and make your comments as short as possible. Do not repeat yourself or others who have already brought up the same issue, please. Okay? Be cordial. All right, let's get started. Go ahead.
Toby?
I'm gonna put Paul Blackburn on now because I have to use my phone and just leave it up here if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, I thought they had him on, but okay.
Oh, he's on. Okay, good. Okay. Anthony James Ventura, 47763, 292nd Street, Hudson, South Dakota, 57034. Thank you for all being here and listening to all the citizens concerned today. I'm going to speak about the ordinance, but in just a little bit of a different way. Since the last planning and zoning meeting and vote on the proposed CDP ordinance.
Toby, or Tony, hang on one second. They can't hear it. Can you turn up the volume? Okay. Go ahead.
We have found areas that need to be further defined for clearer understanding of how the proposed CDP ordinance works. First, the ordinance is a special use permit, which means the application first goes to the planning and zoning director. But if the applicant cannot meet the requirements of the CDP ordinance, then it converts to a conditional use permit. This will allow the planning and director to have the first crack at permitting. Second, the CDP allows carbon pipelines only in the A1 and RC districts and not in any other districts such as commercial and residential districts. The carbon pipeline should not cross hydro-population density parts of the county. Third, with regard to routing and setbacks, the ordinance has built-in flexibility. Initially, if a landowner subject to an easement may grant a waiver from the setback for his or her property if the applicant can negotiate such waiver. So if they can't negotiate, then they go in and they ask the county planning and zoning, county commission for a variance from the planning and zoning is where it should be. It is an application for variance. The applicant is required to alert the board of any legal arguments as to why the setback is applied as illegal. It must also provide information related to the danger zone in event of a rupture. Landowners can also submit comments. Then the board would also consider all of this information and grant a variance with conditions if the threatened litigations has merits. We also found in my speech typographical errors. After correction, we offered a clean version to the planning and zoning director approximately 3 weeks ago and requested him to send a copy to the state's attorney, but so far we have not received any response. People have also contacted me about being close to set lakes, streams, reservoirs, and rivers are concerned. And so I think you need to talk about adding a setback of 1 mile for that, because recreational use, you got people down there, they know nothing about this. If there's an emergency, there's no way out. We hope you would consider this to add in the ordinance tonight. Only the planning and zoning board has the ability to move a pipeline route to a different location. The federal government may not choose a carbon pipeline route, nor may South Dakota Public Utilities Commission. If they can't, only the county can. When you look at high traffic areas such as up north of growth areas and towns, the CDP could severely limit future development near the pipeline. Housing eligibilities are an important asset to any landowner. It is a financial security. Removing them or jeopardizing them due to a pipeline being placed so close to a housing eligibility when they cannot be used is unconscionable. So putting landowners and farmers at economic deficiency, landowners could lose options for development rights. 125 years ago, when I started doing some research, land down south sold for about $20 an acre. I just want you to think about this. Now it's selling some places for over $30,000 an acre. So what's it going to be in 100 years? And you're getting offered this little pittance check to sell out your property for life with no control. The other thing is the way their lines are going, they're dividing up the land into 2 parcels. So if you have a 160-acre parcel and that pipeline goes diagonally through that piece, I'll show you a picture. You're dividing up that land because I can't develop anywhere in the center of that land because that pipeline has rules. So we're losing our land. Without a CDP ordinance, the county government would have no ability to order a change in route to protect the landowners and their development rights. This letter right here is important to read. I'm going to give you copies. Letters are being received by Lincoln County residents from a CDP corporation on or close to April 1st, 2023, stating that the landowner does not agree to the easement terms within 10 days. The corporation believes it will be necessary to petition the court for condemnation proceedings, and this will be the last offer to the landowner. This is an emergency. I mean, we have to get on this. If the board does not accept the CDP ordinance tonight as is or make agreeable changes tonight, then I ask you to send a resolution to the Planning and Zoning Board, by the Planning and Zoning Board, to the Lincoln County Commissioners asking for a one-year emergency moratorium under South Dakota Codified Law, Section 11.2.10, on placement of CDPs in Lincoln County to allow for time to adequately study the issues and fully consider a CDP ordinance. More discussion on how CDP will affect health and safety and financial impact for Lincoln County citizens. And I've actually made a copy that you can have and read also. And then the other company is sending out survey paperwork again when there's legal action going on about survey. So I understand the law. And this is a piece of land I'm talking about. This is the only road access that should be there. This road was removed by the county years ago, so there's no way to get to this parcel of land. May I approach the bench? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time and consideration.
I don't know which way to go. Hello, my name is Emily Smith Back. I live at 47512 277th Street in Worthing. I'm a Lincoln County landowner and resident, and I just wanted to let you know that our family is quite concerned about the safety risk associated with these pipelines, specifically the ruptures. Data that we've seen and read by the U.S. Department of Energy and PHMSA, SMA. Anyway, it indicates that ruptures of carbon pipelines, they've had twice the amount of incidents than natural gas pipelines. I want to remind you that carbon pipelines would be more dangerous than natural gas pipelines because they're held at a higher pressure, 2 to 3 times more pressure than the natural gas. And the way the carbon dioxide wouldn't dissipate the same, how it seems to hover and stay low. Proponents of this carbon pipeline maintain that there's no way these pipelines would pose a health risk, and we're just kind of being crazy, scared landowners, but I believe it would be an oversight to expect these pipelines not to rupture. There was a natural gas leak from a pipeline right near our house on the evening hours of Saturday, October 1st, 2022. The Lincoln County Sheriff officers were dispatched to our house and our neighbor's house and had us evacuated. This pipeline leak happened less than a quarter of a mile from my house. It happened this year, and it happened in Lincoln County. You can even find a record of this under the Lincoln County Sheriff's call log. It's there on October 1st of 2022. Thankfully, our neighbor heard the noise, smelled the gas, and called the Northern Natural Gas. My question is, what would have happened if our neighbor hadn't called it in? What would have happened if this was the middle of the night? So I really want you guys to please work hard on this to protect the residents of our county. Additionally, I know you have an ordinance number 1611-35. It's a setback for wind turbines in this county, and it states that there should be 2,640 feet from the wall of a home. I believe it's completely reasonable for you to pass an ordinance on the carbon pipelines as well. Summit and Navigator want to make us landowners look like we're overly cautious. But the thing is, pipelines do fail, and I'm wondering what the cost needs to be. Is it for the lives of our family members? So please, either pass this ordinance or recommend to the county the one-year emergency moratorium. Are there any questions? Thank you.
I'm Carol Hoynes. I live at 3112 West Auburn Hills Court, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I'm a landowner here in Lincoln County, about 3 miles north of town. First of all, I'd like to say I'm not against ethanol plants. We farm, we sell corn to the ethanol plants, But this hazardous pipeline, all it does is lower the carbon score. It does nothing for the ethanol plants. I think what they should have done is spent $1 million at each ethanol plant and provided a way to capture their own carbon and then reuse it, because that's what's happening in a lot of things. I have two main concerns about the pipeline. First, Summit has stated several times that it wants voluntary easements. Within the very next breath, they turn around to the PUC and ask them for eminent domain, which steals at the land that is not for sale, and it takes away my freedom. My freedom. Secondly is the safety aspect, and I'm going to go over these very quickly. Fact check, Summit Carbon Solutions, Crawford, Iowa, September 1st, written by Bill Karam. It said that Summit likes to tell us that the break in Mississippi all has to do with that additive that they put in there. But after studies with the H2S, there were detections of up to none of that in their studies, but 28,000 parts per million of CO2. So it wasn't the other additive that made the people in Satartia sick. Next, we all know that PHMSA is working on rules because of that. Their new rules come out in October of '24, and PHMSA states this is a hazardous study. They are to study hazardous pipelines. Summit will tell you they've never had a pipeline kill anybody. That is totally correct. They have not had a pipeline kill anybody. The pipelines in the United States, there's about 5,000 miles of them. Most of them are south in Texas, Mississippi, Kansas, and they're not as long as the one proposed to come through here. However, if it does rupture, CO2 will cause people to die. And you can read about that in the Smithsonian, September 2003, about Africa. They had CO2, came up from the bottom. They thought it was a volcanic rupture. It was not. It was coming up in the lake. 1,700 people died, over 1,000 animals. Carcasses were laying around, but there weren't even any bugs on them. And the result of the study, they called in a Harvard University, Rhode Island person, went to Cameroon to study this. The water, as it turned out, was loaded with carbon dioxide. CO2, it's a hazard. We're sitting on a literal time bomb. We've got nuclear warheads in this country. They've never killed anybody in either. But when and if it happens, I would like you to put some precautions in for your citizens and not be responsible for the deaths of many, many people. If this pipeline of 24 inches would have broke yesterday 3 miles north of town with the wind, how long would it take to evacuate the hospital, the nursing homes, the schools? And that's where I'm going to end it. Please put setbacks and really weigh this out, because it is a killer.
Dennis Jones, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. My wife,
Excuse me, what's your address?
4904 South Heatherwood Circle, Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Thank you.
Our land is in Cottington County. And my mother-in-law is the owner of the land. And she's 102 years old. And she's at Avera. And she was served with papers to sign the easement of her land to Summit. Luckily, we were called and we went down there. We have the papers now. And we have told Summit about it. My wife is the power of attorney for her mother. I have a various education in a lot of different areas in science, engineering, etc. I worked the Poison Center at McVera in Sioux Falls. I took care of people that were harmed with dry ice, which is a compressed form of CO2. It can cause severe burns, as you know, but mainly CO2 now is used for euthanasia of chickens and pork. And then the facilities that use it, they have to have government regulations on how the airflow is handled in that to protect the people that's working there to euthanize the animals. My biggest complaint about this whole thing is, I personally believe it's hype. I know about science. I can tell you how, I don't know if you guys know how much carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere. I'm going to assume that you do. But anyway, there's roughly 0.04%. How much oxygen? Roughly 0.02%. Where does oxygen come from when this planet was being formed? First of all, there was all kinds of carbon dioxide, higher than 100,000 parts per million, volcanoes, et cetera, And as plants sprung up, they needed carbon dioxide to reproduce themselves, and they used it and make starch and grow, and they gave off oxygen. That's how our oxygen formed around this planet. Right now, our agricultural land would not be worth much if the oxygen, or the carbon dioxide level got less than 2%, 0.02%. But we need to have that. Right now, the crops where my mother-in-law's land has never been better, and the ethanol plant is putting out CO2. I talked to the relatives that have a business right next door to us, says, a lot of injury and stuff happening to these people. What are you talking about? Allergies, breathing problems, anything? No, we don't have any problem with that. My point I'm trying to make is here, we don't have a serious problem right now. Not until we get over 50,000 parts per million of CO2 on this planet would we have any real health terminal type of problems with individuals. That's not probably going to happen for over 100,000 years. So we got time to really think about what we're going to do with this deal. Don't let them scare you into making a decision today. First of all, if something happened, like happened in East Palestine there where that toxic train wreck happened, well, that was bad, but it's located. This stuff would be twice as bad as that if it was a 24-inch line one. This one that broke in Mississippi was only an 8-inch pipeline. So we got time to think about what happens if it busted, we had that many lawsuits that would be filed against this company. Do we have anything from the state level, from the county level, or anybody's making them put any money in escrow to help? If one down in Mississippi, I don't know if you read about that, it went belly up, it's gone. And somebody else bought it out, but people still haven't been paid for the loss and injury that occurred to them. So I could go on and on all night, and I know a time limit here, so I'm gonna wrap it up. But I'm telling you, elected officials, no matter how much you want the money, you can't give your life, your livelihood, your people away for this. There's time to come up with some good regulations, even the federal government. I talked to them in Washington DC, and the guy at this PHM,
PHMSA.
whatever it is, he says, they're just stalling on it. They don't want to do anything. And I know that this pipeline will have corrosion on the inside because there'll be moisture in there. And eventually, all pipelines will break someplace. So anyway, think about it. These people are asking you, don't give it away. I want to say one last thing, and then I'll be out of here. I told them when I found out about this, I says, we don't want you coming through our land because my mother-in-law's land is valuable. Her great-grandfather got the land from Benjamin Harrison, President of the United States. And 2 sections of that land are the north half of Watertown today. She's got a street named after her there. We just sold 8 acres up there. I shouldn't tell you guys this stuff. $138,000 an acre. And they want to come over there and take the damn thing and take right across the damn middle, take 50 foot out and give us not even enough to buy a pickup. And they want it forever. Now, do you guys think that's right? This whole thing is crazy because it doesn't have to be done now, and I'm not against ethanol. Ethanol's made us some money. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dan Paulson. My address is 47633 277th Street in Harrisburg. I have a question, and it's for I think the state's attorney that was up here. He said that you're not allowed to make an ordinance if it deals with safety, because that's the jurisdiction of the federal government. So my question is, what are the setbacks that the federal government is required to, what they're requiring for a carbon pipeline? So if you could come and answer that, I would appreciate a follow-up question if that's allowed. We don't know what the setbacks are?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that information should be released. Is it 10 feet? Is it 100 feet? That information needs to be released. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Hoffman, 27673 South Dakota Highway 11. I feel like we're getting to know each other pretty well. We have conversations quite a bit. First thing, threat of a lawsuit is no reason to cower, hide, step back from your morals, what you believe. It's a bully tactic. It gets my fur up, makes me want to fight more. Second thing, we had a discussion earlier, a gentleman about wanting another housing eligibility on his land. Oh my God, he's trying to get the money. Nope, can't do it. My wife and I have a property that if this comes through, it's taking ours away. And I know where most of you stand on this, and I just, that's just $1 amount. You're willing to have your statutes and set it against this gentleman for wanting to add another one, which I agree with. But at the same point, they're taking ours away. We're not gonna be able to use that land for what we purchased it for. And we're just they're just crossing 1,200 foot of ours. They ruined the value of our property. And I guess that's just the gentleman's conversation earlier. That's only two things I had. Thank you.
Well, I feel like I should follow him because that was my husband. So Michelle Jensen, 27673 South Dakota Highway 11. So he told you about our property and our situation. And yes, you've all heard me discuss this before. The last meeting we were at a month ago, when the pipeline people were here, I keep asking for safety studies because I've told you that I am a veterinarian, and that's the way things work in our world, is science and studies, and that's how new drugs get found and whatnot. And we were told that night about a study from a different company in a different continent of a different diameter. Well, to me, that's like comparing, I don't know, apples to Twinkies. Like it doesn't work that way in our world. So I'm still looking for those, which I'm going to make play into my next point. And I'm not sure why I wasn't smart enough about some of this before, but do you know what we in the veterinarian or animal production world sometimes use carbon dioxide for? I'm sorry, I hate to say this, but we use it for mass euthanasias. Swine facilities, lab animal facilities. So it is a very good asphyxiant, or effective. Maybe I shouldn't say good, maybe I should say effective. So, that bothers me. It bothers me. I feel like these companies, I asked for safety studies, there aren't any. I'm telling you that we use this for some mass euthanasias, particularly lab animals, rodents, whatnot. I kind of feel like South Dakota's being made rats in a cage here. We we are sort of their safety study. You know, so I want you to think about that when we're asking just for some ordinances and some setbacks and whatnot for safety. So, thank you guys.
John Sharda, 115 Link Street, Valley Springs, Minnehaha County farmer and landowner, and I'm a volunteer fireman. Just speaking from a fireman's point of view, they say they want to train us volunteers. We don't want to be trained for this. We have enough going on in our lives. Volunteer first responders that want to be responsible to help with this. We want to help our neighbors when their houses are burning, when they have an emergency. We don't need to have this unnecessary liability. We need to have better setbacks to keep people safe.
Carla Lems, Canton, South Dakota, landowner. Just wanted to address a few things with you. Obviously, we have the safety issues. I'm going to talk a little bit about landowner rights, property rights surveys. Something happened in 2016 in the legislature that changed our law that says any county with an active application before the PUC to survey private property does not need the consent or the permission of a landowner to do so. So that kind of caught those of us wrapped up in this by surprise. And we tried to get some of those laws changed this year in the state legislature. We did not succeed. They didn't want us changing the rules midstream, which I think we kind of do that often. So, but I just wanted to let you know, I mean, I just got a call from a guy down by Fairview this week, and he's concerned because he just got a letter. He is a man that does not have an active email, and very difficult for him to get information on this, some of our elderly people. He said, can they do this? Can they come on and survey my land? And I said, well, actually, by state law, they can. So I gave him some advice and just said, you know, make sure you're out there when they come and this and that. But I also wanted to point out, we just also got 3 more letters from one of the pipeline companies saying that they're coming again to survey some of our ground. But I would say in our letters, it does not state anything specific to a parcel. So you have no idea where they're coming to unless you can track them down and say, you know, give us more information. I would also like to talk about, I also wanted to just mention that not only do they have the right to survey while they're under consideration for a permit, they can also begin eminent domain proceedings before they are permitted, which you also, I'm sure, know. I would like to touch on expansion of residential areas that would be affected in Lincoln County. We are the 3rd largest county in the state. Does this make sense to have something like this going through our county? Several years back, I'll just use myself as an example, and I'm sure many in this room have their own examples for this, but we were going to do a residential lake project north of the Klondike Road. And we had green lights from the county. We'd already gone through that process. And so we decided at that time, because of our own concerns at that time, to wait for a while before we would do something like that. We've had it in the back of our minds. But then we do know that they went to come through that property through with the pipeline. And so again, that would impede expansion of residential properties within Lincoln County in a great area. Also, land values are very much affected by this. We had property a few months back that we had already had up for auction. This also was north of Highway 18, and had it advertised. Everything was ready to roll. And then we got notice that one of the pipeline companies also wanted to come through that property. And I will just note that this land did have an eligibility on it, so it wasn't, you know, a lot of people are interested in that, and things were still going pretty strong at that time. So we got to the auction date, and of course, we had to disclose that the pipeline was going to come through this property. And we ended up no-selling that property, and I will just say that this was with a very reputable auctioneer that most of you would know. He said, I believe we were the 3rd one ever in many, many years that he has ever no-sailed, so this was not a common thing for him. And I'll just let you make your own conclusions from that. So, okay? Today, I sent a letter to Governor Nome. I'm getting so many calls about this, so many concerns, and I had 22 legislators sign on to this letter with me. I will just touch on a few aspects of the letter. I know time is short. But the undue attack on private property rights of our citizens is an affront to the South Dakota Constitution. And I know, I kind of did some digging. I know you guys maybe don't take an oath to the South Dakota Constitution, but I know the township elected officials do and the county commission does as well. I would just like to read to you from Article 6, Section 1, inherent rights. All men are born equally free and independent and have certain inherent rights, among which of those are enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring and protecting property, and the pursuit of happiness. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, of which you are a part, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. And there are many things that are wrapped up in this that I won't get into, the big picture of what is going on from the world stage that are affecting a lot of these things. But we know that's what's affecting the people in our county is they've gotten a letter from Summit Carbon Solutions that has, that some of them have received that are in the path of this pipeline, that they will be executing condemnation within 10 days. So time is of the essence on this project. There are a lot of people depending on us to do the right thing for them. And so we asked the governor, who we know has a history of standing up for landowner rights, and I'm asking this of you guys too, to do what is right, to stand up for the citizens, to stand up for their rights afforded to us by the Constitution of not only our state, but of our country. And I just would ask for you to stand with the people that elected you. You have the ability to make a difference and to help restore their trust. Thank you.
Ernest Strautmeyer, 28503 474 Avenue, Worthing, South Dakota. It's amazing what money will do. CO2 pipelines permit before the regulations and rules are made. Does that make sense? The poster thing that's posted up here, the current rush to build CO2 pipelines is due to the 45Q tax credit. I asked that question in at Dakota Fest in Mitchell. Asked them if there wouldn't be tax credits, whether they would be doing these projects. Of course, they don't answer. It was just a dance around that. But this here person, Richard, he quoted, "We are getting ahead of ourselves on pipelines for billions of dollars. You will make smart people do incredibly stupid things." He's an expert witness who has worked in the oil and gas industry since the 1970s. These pipelines have no oversight. The U.S. regulations are not in place. And so what that does is that makes South Dakota, the counties, responsible. I don't know what the counties have that they understand about it to be able to regulate it either. CO2 pipelines of this size have never been built before. And the information we've got is that neither of the companies that I have been making proposals have experience in building nor managing hazardous CO2 pipelines. Carbon companies with foreign investors were formed to take advantage of the lucrative 45Q tax credits. Some of these companies have pleaded guilty and been fined multiple times for government fraud. CO2 pipelines have track records of leaks more than 2 times that of natural gas pipelines. And I can speak personally regarding natural gas pipelines because I grew up just east of Worthing here and where the pipeline goes through there. When I was younger, my uncle drove his tractor with a disc behind it across down the road and he thought that he caused a spark because the pipe blew up and clods of dirt were hitting him in the back. But what it was is the pipe blew up and one end stayed connected and it went up and there were overhead power lines there and so they ignited it. But that hole that that pipeline made, which was natural gas, made a hole where you could drop 2 pickups into it. And as far as that area, less than a mile north of that road, which is 280th Street, is Beaver Creek. And as I understand, there was a time that it blew out in the creek also. And another time within the last 10 years, I live 5 miles south, 3 miles south of 18 by Howard Vandel's property where the line is. There, I heard a whistle from my place. And I was going to go up to my mom's anyway, so I went up that way and I could tell that it was in Howard Vandel's property or in that area somewhere that the pipeline blew out again. When they do a test on these pipes, the natural gas one anyway, they don't give warnings to the people and they increase the pressure until it blows out. That's how they do the test. Thank you.
My name is Timothy Wassum, live at 27628 468th Avenue, Lenox, South Dakota. My wife and I have a Christmas tree farm and a greenhouse on the property that we've invested much of our lives in. I have several points I'd like to bring up. One thing that I've wondered about is where we are, there's a pipeline that's going to go right through the middle of our property, about a half a mile through it. And then to the north, I think a little over a mile, the Summit Pipeline goes across. And I know that that's going to make a big impact on the value of our property if we ever decide to sell any of it. And also to sell any of our building eligibilities, we will get virtually nothing for what the true value is now. I've wondered if the county people here have thought about to have these 2 pipelines cross just south of the T area there. I feel like you're putting up quite a wall. We used to have property on the southwest part of Sioux Falls that was in the country. And Sioux Falls developed very quickly and took over that property that we had sold. It happens faster than you think. I think that we're probably within several miles, 2.5 miles probably of T, and T and Lenox, or T and Sioux Falls literally are touching right now in parts. So I think this is going to impede the development going to the south. I think it's going to cause an area that'll be not easy to develop. And it's kind of a shame because there's a lot of nice homes in that area and people that have invested a lot of their livelihoods into it. I've done some research on the pipelines and the threat of it, and there's a couple things here I'd like to read. This is from a company that did a study, Pipeline Safety Trust, on the pipeline. And when the fluid moves through either gas or liquid moves through the pipeline, and if they happen to be mixed together, it can cause a real volatile reaction in the pipe and cause a fracture along sections of pipe, a fracture in it, which can be known as like a zipper opening up in the pipe. And this rupture can release massive amounts of CO2 in a very short time. And it can hurl large sections of pipe out of the ground, there'll be pipe shrapnel flying and generate enormous craters. Another fact that I found quite disturbing was the liquid is being transferred in the pipe, and it requires cooling, and they have to keep it at a slightly below ambient temperature to assure the pipeline operates in one phase. The liquid, however, it is important that the pipeline stay well above the carbon steel brittle temperature transition point of approximately 20 degrees below zero to avoid a threat of catastrophic rupture. The winters in South Dakota can go below 20 below. And if this pipe is exposed by either erosion, water, animals digging, and people don't know it, it could be quite a threat if that pipe is weakened and then later bursts. I guess one thing I've thought about with this is that past generations, they worked, they paid taxes to have a quality of life, and we're doing that today. And I think you need to keep in mind of future generations, because I think the people are the foundation of the county. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joyce Swanson, 27450, 481 Avenue, Canton. I don't know if any of you live near where the proposed pipeline is, but if you don't, would you be willing to buy land along there? Would you be willing to build your home that you want to spend the rest of your life in right by that pipeline? So obviously, it's affecting land values. Like we've already heard that people can't sell the land or they can't sell it for much. Okay. Supposedly, we're trying to do away with cars. Cars using gas, I mean. So if that's the case, this is only a temporary solution at best, because we don't need the ethanol if we don't have gas cars eventually. So what do you do with, we're just doing this to satisfy a temporary need. We've heard about brakes. If there's a break in it, animals and people near the break cannot breathe. Emergency equipment coming to it can't help anybody because the equipment will quit. It needs oxygen to work, especially in the case of break when in really bad weather like yesterday, the windy weather. How far would the damage travel? We have no idea. It hasn't been established. I understand insurance companies won't insure the land. There has to be a reason that they won't insure it. What happens to land that's near it? Not just the land where it happens, but the land that's near. Will that not be insurable either? We don't know that yet. Maybe schools need to have drills for how to survive something like this, what to do. We have drills for fire, for tornadoes and things like that. Maybe they need drills in case of this, to let the public know what's going on with this. I have a solution. Instead of taking this CO2 to Illinois or North Dakota, how about with the company that's producing it Since when they go to that place, they're going to drill a mile down, I understand, and release it down there. How about where they produce this, they drill straight down on their own property and put it there? They don't need to travel with us at all. Straight down on their own property. Let them, if they value the process, bury it right where they are. And if they can't do that, maybe they can find some real isolated part of South Dakota to take it to, not a populated area.
Hello, Drew Denai, 27597 470th Avenue, Lenox, South Dakota. I'm an affected landowner and homeowner. I think we've all been beating the safety thing to death here tonight. I think we get the picture, but I'm a red-blooded American. There's a few things that I'll do anything to protect. That's my family, their safety, my home, my land, you know, and even my money, I guess, too. So these guys are going after all three of those things. It's a direct threat to me, as I view it. The lady before kind of took some of the words out of my mouth. Why can't we build an ethanol plant up in North Dakota where they want to pump it in the ground? I'd much rather have semis, rail cars, whatever, hauling corn by my house than a CO2 pipeline. It's just common sense to me, I think. Let's not pump it all over the countryside and affect everybody in the way. Just bring the corn up there and do it. I'm an auto mechanic, been so for nearly 20 years. I just watched the Super Bowl a few months ago. Every single major car company that had an advertisement, which that's the advertising event of the year, every one of them was for an electric vehicle. Cadillac is going all electric, Jeep had a few vehicles, Chevy, Ford, they all got electric cars coming. So where are we going with all of this? This is a climate change fighting thing. We're looking forward for the big picture for society. I've heard you guys talking about the county commissioners before. The commissioners of past didn't have the foresight for the future. Gasoline, the gasoline burning engine is a relic anymore. It's going by the wayside. We're moving to electric. It makes total sense. So therefore, ethanol is gonna go by the wayside eventually too. Why do we need to have these carbon pipelines in the ground 10, 20, 30 years from now when they're not even gonna be used anymore? It's just gonna open them up for oil or something else dangerous to go in there, so let's put a roadblock in the way. Let's do it a smarter way, please. Thank you.
Toby, I believe Paul Blackburn is online and wanted to talk. I thought.
Yeah, this is Paul Blackburn. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Again, it's Paul, P-A-U-L, Blackburn, B-L-A-C-K-B-U-R-N. I work and live in Duluth, Minnesota. My address is 4028 McCulloch Street. And I work for Bold Alliance, and I'm here because Tony asked me to come. I did a lot of the work on drafting this ordinance, so I'm deeply familiar with it. I worked on pipelines for 14 years. I'm a licensed attorney in Minnesota. In the past, I was licensed in South Dakota, North Dakota, Massachusetts, and Washington, D.C. I worked in the energy industry before I started working for nonprofits because I thought that everyday people should have good, solid lawyers working for them. And I'm originally from the Midwest, from Iowa. First I wanted to say that this is a complicated issue. The technology is complicated, the laws are complicated, and there's just no simple way around it. And so in the sense of, supporting a workshop to understand more about this, that might be a useful idea because it is complicated. I'll let everybody know that tomorrow I'm going to be conducting a webinar tomorrow night at, I believe, 6:30. where I'm going to be talking about the preemption issues in detail. And it's going to be an hour and a half long piece, I believe. And you can be on for as long as you want, but it is complicated, and it takes some time to understand these issues in detail. I invite people to learn about more of that from Tony or from me. Let's see. Yep, there were some drafting errors in the original draft, and we took the feedback about where the errors were. Most of them were minor topographical errors or some scribe errors. We fixed a lot of those, or fixed all of those that were mentioned to us, made it clear, added a little bit more to make it clear about some of the way the legal structure works around this. And we would invite the Planning and Zoning Board to, consider the newer version. But that's just, I understand the reason for having multiple hearings and having this whole process is to make sure that the ordinances get refined and fixed over time. And so that we come up with something closer to perfection at the end of the whole process. I think that it's unfortunate that everything that gets discussed about this legally is an executive session, because there's a difference between talking about what the law means, which shouldn't be an executive session, and talking about what the implications are for litigation. Because just like the Attorney General gives public opinions about the meanings of laws all the time in Attorney General's opinions, certainly the state's attorneys can provide a description of what they think the law means in public. It doesn't have to be private. It should be a public debate. I wanted to first also mention that you might have heard about the rupture down in Mississippi and Satartia. Well, the federal government just entered into a consent agreement with the company there. It's called Denbury. And that in that consent agreement, Denbury agreed to do computational fluid dynamic analysis as the kind of computer modeling for every community of any size, including unincorporated towns, within 2 miles of that pipeline. So for every community within 2 miles of that pipeline, they agreed to do computational fluid dynamic modeling to see if that community was put at risk or not. Doesn't mean that all of them would be put at risk within 2 miles, but they agreed to do that for that pipeline. And I think that's a pretty important precedent, because if it was unreasonable to think about the danger zone could spread out 2 miles, they wouldn't have done that. We've heard about the Shelby County case down in Iowa. That there may have been some bench statements, but that decision hasn't come out yet. In addition to that, that's one district court we don't have a decision on, but we do have in many of these issues actual federal court decisions from multiple courts talking about it and upholding ordinances even when they considered safety. And I'll talk about that a little bit more briefly. There's also a lot of misinformation about the Iowa Utility Board decision, where the Iowa Utility Board had said ruled against this. Well, that's not true. What the Iowa Utility Board said was, we're not going to make this decision about the merits of the preemption arguments now. We're going to make it in the context of discovery and subsequent decisions. But they didn't actually rule on the merits of the Iowa Utility Board. There was a reporter who apparently disbelieved the industry and didn't actually read the IUB decision. The IUB decision was very clear that they just essentially kicked the can down the road for a later decision. And just to get into another thing before I walk into the ordinance a bit, but federal setbacks, just a question about federal setbacks. Federal law, and I'll say this slowly, 49 USC 60104 expressly says that the federal government cannot determine the route or location of a pipeline under the Pipeline Safety Act. So what does that mean? Well, that means that the federal government cannot do setbacks. It's illegal for the Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration, or PHMSA, to issue a regulation on setbacks. It's simply flat out illegal. They can't do it. So why is there this mistaken belief that there's a setback? It's because there's a law, there's a regulation, which says that if a pipeline is closer than 50 feet to a house or structure, it has to be buried a foot deeper. If it's further away, it goes to the standard depth. But that regulation doesn't control the location of the pipeline. It simply controls, if it's closer than 50 feet, it's a foot deeper. If it's more than that, you can build it within 50 feet or further than 50 feet. It doesn't control the distance to the setback. It's not a setback. It doesn't prohibit construction within 50 feet. It says if you do, you have to put it a foot deeper. So it's a depth of cover regulation, not a setback. Well, the federal government has no setbacks, and it cannot, under federal law, have setbacks in pipeline and these hazardous liquid pipelines. A few issues here quickly through the ordinance. In terms of setbacks and routes, state law expressly says that the Public Utility Commission cannot route a pipeline. It's 4941B-36. And so the feds can't because of 60104E, and the state can't because of that state statute. Therefore, the only entity that could route or regulate the location of these pipelines is the county, with Lincoln County, South Dakota, within the county. So, with regard to the setbacks, the question here really comes down to whether you can consider safety in the setbacks or not. There's been ample federal precedent that if it's a non-safety related issue, this is a Texas Midstream case, says that setbacks are perfectly legal. It's a decision of the district court in Texas, and they went to the Fifth Circuit, and that setbacks are perfectly legal for companies to do. Now, that case would involve setbacks based on property values and aesthetics and non-safety issues. But there have been, since then, 3 federal court cases and 1 state court case that have all said, where looked at the county, local government, or in one case, a tribal reservation said that they considered safety as part of their ordinance and decision. And all 3 federal courts said that even though they considered safety, it didn't violate the law. So those are the only 3 federal court cases on this that expressly consider this matter, and they all said that the counties could, the fact they considered safety did not void their ordinances. The state of Minnesota Supreme Court also made a decision expressly on this matter. The state of Minnesota Supreme Court said that it was perfectly legal for the state of Minnesota to consider safety in routing Line 3 pipeline, and that was not appealed by anybody. They couldn't appeal. It could appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, but they didn't. So the state of Minnesota says that they can route a pipeline based on safety. And in fact, they did. I represented clients in that matter, and they chose between 2 different major route alternatives based on safety. And Everidge didn't have any problem with that. And besides that, it didn't matter because once they picked the route, the federal safety standards applied that route fully. And when you've been doing this long enough, you hear some of the claims from the industry, and it's just almost laughable when they say you can't consider safety. I can send you volumes upon volumes upon volumes of testimony from the pipeline industry submitted in administrative hearings at state level from their safety engineers talking about safety. I represented clients in Keystone XL where they did that. Keystone XL, TransCanada did it twice. Line 3, Dakota Access, you name it, they all file safety safety information in federal and state administrative bodies. So, when you look at the routes and setbacks, the real question is whether they consider safety. And the fact the federal courts that have looked at this and written decisions on it, real live decisions on it, have all said that local governments can consider safety as part of their routing decisions. The setbacks also, as Tony said, they can be altered in a variety of ways. They can be a waiver from the landowner. The county can also do a variance. And one of the variance provisions we have in the new version of the ordinance requires that the company tell you what the legal arguments are, that they think it's a legal application of this ordinance to them. So you can make a decision at that point whether you want to give them a variance. And that would simply, if you gave them a variance, they wouldn't have any ground for suing you at that point. So, again, they usually have to exhaust the administrative remedies. And if you have a chance to look at this and decide if their legal arguments have merit before you make a decision, you can do that. And that way avoid litigation. In terms of Section G in the new version, mitigation and construction for operation, frankly, I pulled most of these conditions. It's a very long section. Most of these conditions related to mitigation straight out of the Public Utility Commission, South Dakota Public Utility Commission permit for Keystone XL. All of these conditions are permitted. The South Dakota PUC has already done them. So why include them here? Well, because you might want to tweak some things. Probably the South Dakota Public Utility Commission will include many of these if they give it a permit for this pipeline. But the county could also then impose higher standards if they wanted to. And that's true for the model construction and operating agreement, the cultural, and you know that. So there's other issues like cultural resources and noise. The noise standard came out of the Public Utility Commission here, East Lake South. Similar kind of pumps, the same noise standards that apply. Inspectors and public liaison officers, again, the Public Utility Commission requires that of public information and progress reports. Again, the Public Utility Commission, none of that's preempted, and you can do it too. And then there's a whole section on avoidance, repair, protection of county lands and resources, and you know that is also permitted. There's one piece about the bonding for that the state took over. You can give a recommendation to the PUC on that. Decommissioning, pipeline decommissioning. We hear a lot of industry arguments that oh no, pipeline states can't regulate decommissioned pipelines because it's a matter of safety. Well, the Pipeline Safety Act, again, 49 U.S.C. 60102, I think it's A7, defines a pipeline facility as one that's operating or intended to be operated. So the entire Pipeline Safety Act applies only to pipelines that are actually operating or in process of being constructed or mothballed, but there's an expectation will be operated in the future. Once a pipeline ceases operations, there's no reason for it to be federally regulated because the whole point of federal regulations is to keep product in the pipeline. But if it's permanently removed from service, there's no more product in it. There's no more product in it. So therefore, it's no longer subject to Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Act or administration to the Pipeline Safety Act because it's just a bunch of, it's basically just scrap steel on the ground at that point. And the federal law doesn't regulate scrap steel on the ground. Minnesota
Paul,
again.
excuse me, Paul.
Has two.
Paul,
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We just kind of on a time constraint this evening, so
Okay.
I'm just going to cut you
Okay.
off right there.
Okay, well, thank you for your time, and hope people can attend the webinar tomorrow night.
Thank you.
Well, good evening. I'm Joy Hone, and I live about 13 miles west of Hartford in Minnehaha County. We're here asking you to look at intelligent land use, which means intelligent setbacks. When you're looking at these setbacks, we're asking you to consider a few things, and one is the safety valves. In their presentations, these companies state that when there is a pipeline leak, notice that I'm saying when and not if, that all they have to do is turn off the safety valves remotely, and this is done from out of state. The county should realize and be asking both someone and navigator what the process really is. It is not a quick shut-off process, which they are misleading all of us on and would like you to believe. To shut a CO2 pipeline down after a leak takes time. If only the shut-off valves were closed between these 20-mile distances, it will create back pressure that will create more ruptures. According to an engineer during the Burleigh County Planning and Zoning meeting on March 8th, it is a process and takes time to correctly shut a CO2 pipeline down. Another point of concern is bankruptcy. Referring back to the Satartia, Mississippi pipeline rupture, it shows how quickly a company can have a quick and easy exit by declaring bankruptcy, which then consequently leaves the burden to our government and landowners and citizens themselves. Here's the timeline from the Satartia, Mississippi rupture. The pipeline was owned by Denbury Gulf Coast, and all of this occurred in the year 2020. February 22nd of 2020 is when the CO2 pipeline ruptured. July 30th of 2020, Denbury Gulf Coast filed for bankruptcy. September 15th of 2020, they reorganized. So from rupture to bankruptcy was less than 6 months. Bankruptcy can void the terms of lease agreements. Most of the affected people in Satartia, Mississippi rupture have yet to receive fair compensation for their injuries. And the most severely affected have become dependent on the state. The companies don't want to release their plume modeling risk assessment because it could be detrimental for a terrorist attack. But yet, it's all right for all of us to risk our lives for their profit. We need these studies so that you can determine intelligent setbacks for intelligent land use. With the proposed setbacks and ordinances, they can still obtain waivers. This would just give landowners more of an even playing field. Other counties are passing ordinances and/or moratoriums. This is extremely important, and it is your duty to protect the people. Remember that this is about the people and the economic development of the county. When Lincoln County adopted the wind turbine ordinances, what was the basis for the wind turbine setbacks? You need to look at that. Both counties have significant foreign ownership. Summit has ties to South Korean company that pleaded guilty and fined multiple times for government fraud. Navigator is funded by BlackRock, which also has foreign ownership. Both companies were formed to take advantage of the lucrative 45Q tax credits. Summit and Navigator Pipelines have never built a CO2 pipeline, and to add even more concern, they're proposing to build the longest in length and the largest in diameter CO2 pipeline in the United States. Neither company has experience in building nor management of hazardous CO2 pipelines. And I would like to ask, who in this room is in favor of this CO2 pipeline? Who is opposed to the CO2 pipeline? Who in this room, including the pipeline representatives, would like to live or have their family live by a CO2 pipeline?
I would.
Time is of the essence. They tout pipeline safety by saying that they want to remove the CO2 from the air as part of the Green New Deal. They're saying that you can't impose these ordinances because of safety. We are asking you to protect the people of Lincoln County, and please pass some ordinances for their protection. Thank you for your time.
Clayton Wrench. South Dakota. I have heard a lot of talk.
Sorry, Clayton, can we get your address?
23258 480th Avenue, Landrew, South Dakota.
Thank you.
If these pipelines go through, I'd like to know what Summit is doing to educate the public. There are sirens in every town that'll let you know when severe weather is approaching. That awful screech on the radio will let you know when and where bad weather will hit. There's even an app on your phone that you can get that'll let you know when severe weather is coming. With weather warnings, you at least have an hour or better to prepare. With a CO2 rupture, you will only have minutes to prepare, which makes first responders practically useless. The public has to be educated to better their survival during a rupture. It can be done through radio, television, mailings, newspaper, to name a few. Quarterly public meetings to keep people updated would be helpful. As long as the pipeline is in operation, the public has to be continually educated. What would happen if a rupture occurred, saying during rush hour, or you're driving down a road and come upon what looks like fog? How would you know that how do you know that it would be a gas that's going to kill you? What type of warning in rural areas? What type of warnings can be put in rural areas? Some type of warning is a must, and this is the pipeline's responsibility. Navigator and Summit talk about how safe this pipeline is. Seat belts and airbags in a car are safe too, but they don't always prevent you from getting killed. It just bettered the odds of survival. Setbacks are the seat belts and airbags to better their survival during a rupture. You think they would be more concerned about safety and educating the public instead of suing landowners and counties. Their PR work is horrible at best. We're just collateral damage. I gotta switch gears here, so just give me a little second. Additionally, there was concern about water issues. They stated, one had stated that we were gonna take 14 million gallons of water annually to cool this capture equipment. A representative from Lewis Clark had said that seems kinda low. But I don't know, you know, that equivalates to over 38,000 gallons a day, which is a, pretty small, relatively speaking. And the wastewater, the contaminated wastewater, what's gonna become of that? I wish they would answer that, cause I don't know. Put it back in reservoirs or in huge holding ponds, you know, it's kind of a waste, another waste of a valuable resource, just like this CO2 is. It's a valuable resource. Electricity rates too. You can look that up. You know, it takes a tremendous amount of energy to produce this stuff and make it happen. In my personal opinion, when it's all said and done with all this sequestration and stuff, it might be a wash, if that. So that's all I have, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Yes.
I was wondering if you want to consider taking a break.
Okay. Go ahead.
I could go to that.
I'll be short then, so you can take a break. Dennis Jerbeck, 2321 Mockingbird Circle, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. We have farmland about 10 miles south of Canton here that they want to go through the land. Okay, so we read the easement offer that they gave us. The safety issues and the land values are all important, and I echo those, don't get me wrong. But one thing I do have another question on. This easement, as I read it, is permanent, forever, in perpetuity, as they say, not just a few short years here. This is a private, for-profit corporation, as I understand it. It's not like a public utility. And otherwise, why would they want the federal tax credits, right? But the other part of it is this. Natural gas lines, oil pipelines are regulated by the PUC. Here's my question. Who regulates the CO2 pipeline? As I heard here tonight, and I've been to two other meetings, one in Harrisburg and one in Sioux Falls, nobody seems to know. Nobody seems to know. I think that should be pretty clear. Who regulates this? Because in that easement, as I read it, they say what they can and they cannot do to us as landowners. They say one thing. They can abandon this. They can abandon it. It says that in the agreement. Now what? We got a pipeline down there for perpetuity. Who regulates that abandoned pipeline? That's what I think we need to answer. And I understand the federal government, through the Department of Transportation, PHMSA, is charged with the responsibility of coming up with regulations to help manage or control or regulate the CO2 pipelines. But that's not, they're charged with it October of 2024, a year and a half. So why the rush? Why the rush? That's another question I have. What's rushing this thing? Is it money? Is it money? Thank you for your time.
Don Clausen, 47174, 275th Street. When we complained about our taxes a year ago, the county commissioners said we live in a highly desirable area. We're a mile north of the proposed Navigator and Summit pipelines. We're 4 miles south of the Sioux Falls city limit. Last year, 3 properties sold west of us and 1 east of us. One west of us was 5 acres for $250,000. Now, those land values are going to plummet if a pipeline goes through where they're proposed. Carbon dioxide, CO2, is an extremely dangerous gas because it's heavier than oxygen and thus displaces oxygen, asphyxiating animals and humans without distinction, as well as incapacitating engines relying on oxygen. Not only is it lethal, CO2 is colorless, tasteless, and odorless. When a CO2 transmission pipeline ruptures with over 2,000 pounds of pressure, it can spew out hundreds of tons of deadly gas in seconds. Considering that the city of Sioux Falls is the largest city in the state and also a very rapidly growing city, having a CO2 pipeline within a few miles would potentially jeopardize the lives of hundreds, if not thousands of people, possibly killing them within a few minutes of a CO2 pipeline rupture. Any CO2 pipeline within 30 miles of Sioux Falls and the surrounding towns should very definitely not be approved because many people's lives could be extinguished very rapidly. Without expensive, sophisticated breathing equipment, first responders would not be able to enter a contaminated area at all without jeopardizing their own lives. The chances are slim to nil that first responders could even arrive in the few minutes necessary to rescue any victims. Even if they could arrive near an accident scene before their vehicles died and had to travel on foot, the chances of them supplying sufficient oxygen in time to a large number of people is unreasonable. State legislature did not protect us citizens this year. It's your responsibility as Lincoln County Commissioners to protect the citizens in Lincoln County. A CO2 pipeline is not suitable for anywhere near the largest city in the state nor within 30 miles of Baltic, Brandon, Canton, Crooks, Harrisburg, Hartford, Renner, T, Valley Springs, and Worthing. Recognizing that CO2 pipeline companies have considerable financial power with out-of-state, out-of-country financial backing, I beg you, Lincoln County Commissioners, not to be bribed nor threatened with lawsuits like they did in Iowa. I beg you not to be bribed nor threatened to approve of a CO2 pipeline anywhere in Lincoln County, nor within 30 miles of Sioux Falls. Considering that a few years ago Lincoln County was the fastest growing county in the nation, I plead that you commissioners not approve trenching, construction of a CO2 pipeline, and transportation of CO2 within 30 miles of Sioux Falls, and that's a big part of Lincoln County. I implore you commissioners not to approve of such an extremely deadly gas pipeline to be lead anywhere in Lincoln County. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
can I make a comment?
Yes, please.
I just want to clarify something that what's before us tonight is it has nothing to do with whether we approve the pipeline or we don't approve the pipeline. It pertains to setbacks of the pipeline. So, that isn't even anything that's in our jurisdiction or power is to be able to approve or not approve the pipeline. Just want everybody to be clear on that.
My 30-mile suggestion is a setback.
Okay. Well, that's not in the ordinance currently, as written.
Okay. Okay. I think now we will, okay, we'll take one more. We'll take one more, and then we're going to move on to the opposition. Okay,
Here to beat the same drum I've been beating. Earlier, a lady mentioned the disaster at Lake Nyos in Africa. And that plume killed people from 14 to 16 miles away from the source of the leak. That's my comment on setbacks.
okay. Okay, I am going to close the floor on, for the ordinance, and I will open it to the opposition. Anybody?
You coming to the phone? Hello?
Yep, we can hear you. Just 1 second.
This one? Okay. He can go ahead.
Okay, you can go ahead.
All right, thank you for your service to Lincoln County. My name is Walter Wendland. I live at 802 Redwood Avenue in Oneida, South Dakota. I'm a landowner in Buffalo and Hyde County. I am also president of the South Dakota Ethanol Producers Association and president and CEO of Ringneck Energy in Oneida, South Dakota. According to the United States Department of Agriculture, corn production provides South Dakota with a total value of $4 billion. Of course, you know, our industry purchases over half of the corn produced in our state. South Dakota has become an ethanol leader, ranking 4th in the nation, passing Minnesota and Indiana in the past year. Why? Because South Dakota is a business-friendly state. Just 3% of the more than 1.44 billion gallons of ethanol we produce annually is utilized in the state, making our industry reliant upon outside markets for the value and increased value of our product. Many of our largest ethanol markets, both domestically and internationally, increasingly demand lower or net carbon fuel options. There is not a single option that is more helpful for producing low carbon fuel than carbon sequestration. That is the opportunity that lies ahead with the commitments being made to carbon capture projects. These investments in our infrastructure will allow ethanol producers to reduce the carbon intensity of their products significantly, in turn ensuring access to higher value markets for decades. Accessing these markets represents an enormous and essential economic opportunity for the ethanol industry, which is why nearly every ethanol company operating in South Dakota and across America's Corn Belt has joined in one of these projects. The inability to not participate would be the demise of the ethanol industry and put South Dakota ag economy in a tailspin. I've been there before. I farmed in the 80s as a young farmer. I lost 70% of my value on my land and on my machinery through the 80s period. We could cause a repeat of that within South Dakota, eliminating the demand for ethanol from our state with the inability to produce a low carbon fuel. With ethanol contributing $600 million to South Dakota's gross domestic product every year, we believe the long-term economic benefit of carbon capture projects are clear and overwhelming. A strong ethanol industry is good for South Dakota farmers. It's good for South Dakota businesses, and it's good for South Dakota as a whole. We respectfully ask the committee to recognize the value of the technology for the county and state and support the permitting process that allows landowners and ethanol producers to get involved in the projects to continue moving this project forward. I've heard a lot of comments tonight, and one of them I hear repeatedly. We like ethanol, but we don't like the carbon pipeline. The two are inseparable. We can't have an ethanol industry without carbon pipeline. And I beg you to understand the relationship there. It is inseparable at this time. And there's no doubt that without a carbon pipeline, South Dakota loses their ability to compete in the low carbon fuel market. And I'm also part of the Grain Producers Grains Council Ethanol Committee. And I just got back from the annual meeting that talked about, the countries all around the world are demanding a low carbon fuel. And like I say, we can get to be the low carbon market. Our ethanol plant in Oneida is the newest in the country with the best technology. But without carbon sequestration, we won't stand a chance to make any money. So for that reason, I ask you to cooperate and stay in step with the PUC and let them determine the value or the going forward for this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in opposition?
Brandy Nocton, Environmental and Regulatory Manager for Navigator CO2. I will want to point out a few items in the ordinance that I have. According to Mr. Blackburn's comments, I'm not sure if it's the current one or revised one. So I'm not sure which copy of the ordinance we're supposed to be looking at for this comment period. Largely, the ordinance language are already things that are covered by the South Dakota PUC, for which we have an application in with, filed around September of last year. Docket number HP 22-002, of which all impacted counties are automatically party status applicants to and can participate in those proceedings. So I do encourage Lincoln County to participate in those proceedings. We're in discovery right now, and so we're answering a lot of the same questions that we're hearing here today with that process. Not only are we regulated by the South Dakota process under 49-41B, we're also regulated under PHMSA, which is the Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration, under 49 CFR 195. And I think someone had asked earlier about the setback regulation, if you will, or difference of opinion in language. It's 49 CFR 195.210, and it specifically states, and I'll read both parts, pipeline right-of-way must be selected to avoid, as far as practicable, areas containing private dwellings, industrial buildings, and places of public assembly. Part B, no pipeline may be located within 50 feet of any private dwelling or any industrial building or place of public assembly in which persons work, congregate, or assemble unless it is provided with at least 12 inches of cover. And that's not only depth, but there are many other factors of safety that go into building and constructing a pipeline. And again, all of that is the construction, operations, and decommissioning is all regulated by PHMSA. Part G, the long list of items that Mr. Blackburn, pointed out as part of a sort of construction mitigation and reclamation plan. I argue that is beyond the scope of the Planning and Zoning Board to require these items. But again, with the PUC process, we've submitted a comprehensive plan that entails, or that discusses mitigation measures and our plan for construction and restoration for most of these items, if not all. And anything that's not covered is covered by plans that we submit with the South Dakota DANR and/or the Game and Fish. Related to environmental, sorry, I'm looking for the ordinance language. Related to environmental impact statements, I, again, struggle to see how that's in the purview of the county. It's typically a NEPA process, and we're going through that process not only with the U.S. Army Corps, we're going through it with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and we also have a environmental assessment that has been submitted again with the South Dakota PUC application.
Are those on file with?
Yes.
That we can look up online?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect.
Under that docket. Let's see. I think the last item that I will note is related to the decommissioning. Under 49 CFR 195.402 and 49 CFR 195.59, those reference abandonment activities. That is the physical abandonment of the asset, whether that's by ending its lifespan or lifetime, as relates to returning that easement back to the landowner, typically for all pipeline companies, not just a carbon pipeline. Once an asset has reached the end of its service life, those full easement is reverted back to the landowner for full use. So I will leave it at that. If you have any questions, happy to answer them. Oh, and I guess if there is, I think the opening statement was related to a working group or something like that. We're happy to participate and or come and present at any time. So thank you for your time.
Pardon?
Name and address.
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry.
I did state my name in the very beginning, Brandy Nocton, and I'm officed out of Omaha, Nebraska.
The address?
One 3333 California Street, Suite 202, Omaha, Nebraska. Do you need a zip code as well? Okay.
Can I reply to a comment from one of the participants about Ringneck Energy? For just a second, this is Walt Wendland again.
No comments, no replies, sorry. We're just letting people.
Okay. Yeah.
Next for opposition.
John Yon, you can go ahead.
Yeah, okay. This is John Godfrey. I'm with DNV. And good evening, Madam Chairwoman and Commissioners.
Can
My
we get your
business
address,
address
John?
is-
I'm sorry,
Yes,
can we
ma'am.
get your address?
Yes, ma'am. My business address is 5777 France Road, Dublin, Ohio.
Thank you.
And we have some, and thank you very much for allowing me to present remotely this evening. Unfortunately, I'm not able to be there with you due to some last-minute concerns, but we do have a few slides prepared, and I believe those should be up for you now. Is that correct?
There's one up, yes.
Okay. All right. If we could advance to the first slide, please.
Okay.
The who is DNV slide. Well, give you my experience first. As I said, my name is John Godfrey. I've been in the pipeline industry for just over 35 years. Graduate of the University of Illinois, and I've worked in positions in pipeline operations, design, construction, integrity management, also with a stint in pipe manufacturing and integrity inspection and testing. And 8 years ago, I joined DNV as a consultant. And I've been working with pipeline operators. I've been working with the regulatory community, with state agencies, and with the federal government on pipeline safety issues and pipeline regulatory issues, including carbon dioxide pipeline safety. DNV, as an organization, is headquartered in Norway. We're the world's leading certification and standardizing company in the maritime industry, but also in the energy pipeline and renewable energy resource area. We have written the first international standard, recommended practice F104 for carbon pipeline design, construction, and operation. We also conducted the full-scale testing that's often been referenced. I believe some of it was referenced this evening. Full-scale rupture testing of CO2 pipelines for evaluation of dispersion and hazards. And we also conducted the metallurgical evaluation and metallurgical investigation of the Satarsha accident. So I'm prepared to speak to all three of those if requested or if necessary. Moving on to the next slide, CO2 pipelines in the U.S. A lot of these statistics have been brought up by people who presented earlier and did a very nice job of summarizing the number of miles in the U.S. and some of the other operating characteristics of the existing carbon dioxide pipeline network. But a couple of things to point out. The very first CO2 pipelines installed in the U.S. were actually installed in the 1950s. The United States has the longest history of CO2 pipelines in operation of any nation on Earth, really. And in the 1980s alone, over 2,000 miles of CO2 pipelines were constructed. The largest diameter line is actually a 30-inch diameter line that extends 500 miles. That's larger than the proposed 24-inch of Summit. And the highest operating pressure of CO2 pipeline systems is 3,260 PSI, which is also greater than both the Summit and the Navigator pipeline designs. So while the mileage is increasing with these projects, the actual diameter of pipe and the actual operating pressures is not increasing beyond what we have currently in the United States. And looking at the last 20 years of pipeline safety data, there has only been one recorded injury in the past 20 years, and that's actually to a contractor who was working for a pipeline operator in a facility who was injured during some form of a release. That even though a number of people have talked about injuries at Satarsha, and a number of people sought medical care and were admitted to hospital or checked themselves in, none of them were actually attributed directly to the carbon dioxide release. None of those are actually recorded in the regulatory database. We can talk about that more in a few minutes. But if we could switch over to the next slide, please. There's also been a lot of talk this evening about pipeline safety regulations. And that PHMSA is going to be bringing out some new regulations next year. The only regulations that we are aware of, and we work with PHMSA, and we also work with the Department of Energy on research into CO2 pipelines and into CO2 compositions. The only regulation that we're aware of that would occur that quickly is actually the notice of proposed rulemaking and invitation for public comment. The federal regulatory rulemaking process is very lengthy. It is going to take a significant amount of time for any significant or meaningful changes to the existing regulations to address CO2. But one area that can be addressed very quickly that PHMSA intends to do is to address the issue of transportation and classification of CO2. Right now, CO2 is regulated as a hazardous liquid if it's transported in the supercritical or dense phase. CO2 that's transported in gaseous phase or as a liquid currently doesn't fit within the regulatory scheme. It's just an oversight. No pipelines operate as gas. No pipelines operate as solely liquid. They primarily operate or exclusively operate in dense phase transportation. So that's where the regulations have been. And just as a process check, you should be on a slide right now that leads off CO2 pipeline regulation in the title. There we go.
Yes.
Okay. The lag on your live feed is excellent, but there's a slight lag. I can't tell exactly which slide you're on. But the regulations that are included, that have been mentioned by other parties, promulgated by the U.S. DOT and enforced by PHMSA, cover the full life cycle of the pipeline. They include both the design, the operation, the maintenance, and just as importantly, the integrity management of the pipelines. CO2 pipelines are regulated the same as any other hazardous liquid line, including lines that carry gasoline, diesel, anhydrous ammonia, propane, even butane, ethane, ethylene, and natural gas liquids. The CO2 pipelines are not the only pipelines that carry denser than air products. They're not the only ones that carry volatile products. They're not the only ones that operate in those pressure regimes or the temperature regimes. And the steel itself, with the exception of fracture mechanics, doesn't really care what's inside of it. So the design and operation of a CO2 pipeline, both in regulation and in practice, does not vary that much from any other hazardous liquid or highly volatile liquid. Moving to the next slide, carbon dioxide characteristics. Speaking a little bit more about what the CO2 is that's transported and proposed to be transported in the Summit pipeline. CO2 can exist, as I mentioned, in a couple of different phases in transport. And there's the fourth phase, which was also mentioned tonight, dry ice. So it can really operate or exist in four phases. Only two of those, both dry ice and as a gas, can exist at atmospheric pressure. To be a liquid or a supercritical phase, it has to be under considerable pressure. And that dense phase, when it's pressurized up to the point where it becomes denser than a gas, but has the viscosity of a gas, where it's not quite a liquid and it's not quite a gas, is where pipelines prefer to transport it, because you can get the volume of a liquid, meaning the density and the amount of mass of a liquid, but it flows with the viscosity of a gas and is much easier to compress and move. CO2 itself is not reactive, it's not flammable, and it's not combustible. CO2 works as been mentioned, it works as an asphyxiant and has threshold values, and I am not a toxicologist. We have, as DNV, published threshold values that align with ISO and international global harmonized safety standards. There are more that are available through NIOSH and OSHA. And if people are interested in understanding the exposure limits, there's some great studies out there. Some of the best studies are actually been done by the United States Navy for the CO2 effect on submariners who are confined in submarines for a long period of time. So there is plenty of information that's available out there if people want to take a look into that. But moving on to the next slide, talk a little bit more about dense phase transportation and the effects of impurities. One of the things that the PHMSA regulations are going to be exploring will be the impact of impurities on the CO2 stream, because impurities are one of the few things that are not fully covered in the regulation right now. And impurities are things like combustion products, naturally occurring products, gases that occur naturally in nature that mix with the CO2, all of those have an effect of changing the pressure and the temperature at which CO2 becomes supercritical, and also change the density of the CO2 and how it reacts in air. When we talked about, or when people talk about the release at Satartia, Mississippi, the Satartia release did contain H2S. At the time the air was sampled, after the response was well underway, the H2S had largely dissipated, but it was very well documented from inline testing, batch testing, and the source of the CO2 for Denbury. That was a natural formation, and it had a high concentration of H2S. And H2S is very much in line with the symptoms a lot of people experienced. The case that occurred in Africa, where the lake inverted and CO2 that was entrained in the water in the volcanic lake was released, that was also naturally occurring CO2 that had a high level of impurities in it that changed the density of the CO2. And that was a very tragic accident, and it was very unique to a very specific geologic volcanic formation that's not reproduced in pipeline transportation. CO2 also operates as a very excellent solvent. In supercritical phase, as is being proposed by Summit for transportation, all of those impurities actually will be flushed out, and they'll be carried with the CO2 to the endpoint. They won't be allowed to linger. They're not going to precipitate out any place unless there is a pressure reduction, unless pressure is reduced on the line for any particular reason, in which case impurities can drop out. It's important to manage those impurities at the origin source. And ethanol plants produce almost pure CO2. The only impurities possible are traces of oxygen and traces of nitrogen in their process, which are very easy to manage and don't lead to any higher internal corrosion rates or any increase in the toxic effect of CO2 or in its ability to displace oxygen. So moving on to next slide, slide 7.
John, we do
Yes,
have,
ma'am.
we do have time constraints, so
Yes, ma'am.
I
Can I have
apologize.
2 minutes, or am I done?
You can have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Some of the big things that are challenging industry right now are exactly the issues that are going on here. The source of CO2 is generally a long distance from where it can be disposed of and where it can be sequestered. Sequestration sites are very rare. It takes a very specific geologic formation to do it, and it doesn't occur in every location. If we can go to the second to the last slide, please. One of the things that was discussed, I'll touch on very briefly, is fracture mechanics. It was mentioned that CO2 has the propensity to cause fractures that can run long distances, and that's not exactly correct. CO2 has the energy to propagate a fracture, but the fracture has to occur from another cause. It's induced by a mechanical line strike or damage to the pipe. CO2 will decompress at a speed that causes cracks to grow in vintage material. Modern line pipes with proper metallurgy and crack arresters do not fail in that fashion. And I'll end it with a caution on interpreting full-scale test results. One of the gentlemen earlier today, I noticed on the live feed, had a picture on the podium of a vapor cloud from a full-scale test, and that was actually one of ours. Those results in that video and those photographs are labeled not to be used without written permission, because they're often misinterpreted. That photo in particular has been misinterpreted. That's actually not a CO2 cloud, that's water vapor. And that test was done to measure the levels of CO2 at a release, and it was found that they had never exceeded 17% by volume, even as close as 50 meters to the release site, which is a threshold value, and were not in any way dangerous outside of that range. So I caution people when looking at any of the videos or photographs that have circulated of any of our full-scale tests. Those are not used with permission, and unfortunately they're being misrepresented. We are here to answer questions about those and can do that if you would like. And thank you very much for your time. I'm sorry I ran long.
That's fine, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else? No? No? No, you don't want to speak tonight?
Hey, Aaron Eldridge, Summit Carbon Solutions Project Manager, address 2123 North Loop Drive, Ames, Iowa. For brevity's sake, I think everything that I normally talk about has been covered, but I will just make myself available for questions if the Planning and Zoning Board does have any. Thank you.
Is that all? Okay. Well, I am going to close the floor now. So, I was going to ask for a motion from the commission, as you heard from our legal. There are some issues with the zoning ordinance that was brought forth. We have done some corrections. We do think that we need a little bit of time to look into this a little further, to try and get this in the order to where we know that it is good. To where we can get it to help our citizens and to make everybody happy. At this point, what I want to do or what I believe the board wants to do, and we can all have a discussion now. I think we're going to get a committee going. It was said to maybe recommend it to the commission to place the committee, but I think it's our place to make the committee myself, because I want to be on the committee and I want to make sure that I'm on the committee. So I think we'll let everybody else speak as well, but I think we need to make the committee and meet with everybody and make sure that this zoning ordinance is going to be doable. Get it put in a form that we know that we can get passed and that we can hand down to the commission and that they will be happy with.
Madam Chairman, I would move that we refer this to a committee appointed by the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission, I'm sorry. Johnson.
I'll second Scott.
All right, we have a motion to do a committee with us appointing them with a second, and I will do roll call. Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Commissioner Jones.
Are we going to do discussion?
Oh,
before we
yes,
vote?
I'm sorry. Let's do a discussion. Yeah, let's do a discussion. What do you all think after hearing all this? I mean, we've been through this for a couple months now. I know this is a important subject for a lot of people. A timely matter, obviously. But we want to do it right. We want to make sure everything's done right. So.
I agree. If we're gonna go forward with the ordinance, I think everybody, including the citizens and everybody that sits on this board, for sure wants it to be right and wants it to be something that we can pass up to the county commission and that they can accept and work with and so I think that currently there's some things in the ordinance that need to be discussed and reviewed, and so hopefully, by moving to form a committee to do this, we can get a good ordinance that that not only we can pass through this board, but hopefully can hand up to the county commission. And thanks for everybody that came out tonight. I appreciate it.
Excuse me. I agree the same. We have too many issues we've heard from both sides, and we've heard some corrections, and just so many things out there. And this is so important to, like I said, long-term. And this is families, this is land values, this is long-term easements, and I think we do a disservice if we did not vent through everything that we possibly can to make sure this is right for Lincoln County. So with that, sometimes the best thing is to take a step back, gather all the information you can, hear from professionals on both sides, and put together an ordinance that is the absolutely best that we can do. So I do agree, a committee and looking at this is the right thing.
I think one other thing, it allows a little time to gather some more knowledge on what other counties are doing and what other federal cases might impact our decisions.
I differ a little bit from the perspective of, like, I could see making a recommendation of at least allowing the chairwoman to be a co-chair of a committee. I would like to see some ownership by the county commission in this process. So I would recommend that this actually be a committee set up by the Board of Commissioners of Lincoln County, versus one that is independently chartered by our group. So my recommendation would be that it's actually chartered by the Board of Commissioners. So because of that, I'm probably going to vote no.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I'm in agreement with you. We've set up several ad hoc committees to look at things that have people involved from all sides, and I think that's probably the best way to go. So I'm with you. I'm probably a no just for that reason, but have no objection to a committee being set up. But I think the details of that need to be worked out as far as how the person is chosen, how many people will be on the committee, and that sort of thing. So I think this should go to the commission because I can't speak for the commission. I'm just a representative here tonight, but those are my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
And the value I see in that is if the Board of Commissioners don't agree with what our recommendation is, we're going to be waiting a month to come back here and be in the same place, because it will come back to the Planning and Zoning Commission. So if sent to the commission for a recommendation to set up a committee of stakeholders, I think it at least expedites this process for us. Hopefully, having the chairwoman of the Board of Commissioners will help to get it on their agenda quickly. But from my perspective, I do think that's where this belongs.
Well, I think there was a misunderstanding. There's obviously going to be commissioners on the committee, but I just wanted to ensure that I want to make sure that I'm on the committee. And some of us, at least one of us, are on the committee, considering it is a planning and zoning issue to begin with, that we need to be on the committee, and we need to ensure of that. And yes, of course, the commissioners will be involved. That's a given, because it has to go to them. So yes, we would have them involved, because we want whatever we decide in the committee to be passable by both us and them.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to amend my motion that the committee would be appointed by the chairman of the Planning and Zoning Committee and the chairman of the County Commission, to include 2 planning and zoning members and 2 county commissioners.
I'll second that, Scott.
Any discussion on that?
I think Commissioner Green made a good point about including and, you know, just, I don't think it needs to be all of us. I think a small group would be a little more nimble, and if you and the chairman of the county commission can work together on putting that together, I think that would be fantastic.
I do appreciate Navigator's commitment to participating in the process. Hopefully Summit has that same commitment to this process in working through what is hopefully reasonable solutions for Lincoln County.
Any other discussion? All right, we'll do a roll call. Commissioner Johnson?
And this would be on the amendment.
On the
how
amended one.
How the committee is selected. I'm a yes.
Commissioner Jongling?
Yes.
Commissioner Instead?
Yes.
Commissioner Green?
No.
Commissioner Scott?
Yes.
Commissioner Landine?
I'm going to vote no, and it's basically just on the form of the motion, not the idea or the process itself.
Commissioner Hogan is a yes. The motion passes. So there will be a committee that is formed by myself and Commissioner Landine.
Point of order, we would have to approve the committee,
Correct.
the referring it to a committee.
Because that was just for
That was to approve the amendment.
that was just the amendment.
Oh,
So now I have to call roll again.
okay. So yes, let's, and we are going to approve to move this to a committee. Number 3, the Code of Ordinances for the zoning. We are going to move this to a committee to look into it further. Do I have a motion?
I'm just going to point out, I don't think this board can direct the county commission to do anything. So that is the substance of my voting no on this.
I think we already have a motion.
I think we
Correct.
do. I just want
Yeah.
it to be clear that I'm not sure this motion is appropriate.
I guess it would just be referred up to the
Yeah.
county commission.
I guess the way I understand the way I understand the amendment is that the committee be made up of 2 county commissioners, 2 planning and zoning commissioners, that will be decided by Commissioner Hogan and Commissioner Landine,
And include themselves. yeah.
and include themselves. That was the amendment now we're voting on, and that passed. And so that makes up the committee, and that's up to you two to decide who the balance of your committee would be. And now we're gonna vote on if we're gonna refer it to a committee.
Correct.
But I think the point of Commissioner Landine was that we can't direct the board to participate. The Board of Commissioners makes recommendations to the Planning and Zoning Commission, not the other way around.
I think in this case, where we're recommending for a committee, we can,
I would think it would be appropriate that the board move to recommend that a committee be established by the county commission. And then that is something that I could support, because I think that's how it needs to work as far as
I
what this
guess if
board
we,
does.
I guess if we wanted to pass it as that we're gonna, the committee's gonna come out of here, I guess then we maybe can't say that it has to be 2 county commissioners and the chairman of the county commission. I think that's what Commissioner Landine's saying.
So if you just say that the committee's gonna come out of here, and then we can just include commissioners, is that
We can ask.
correct?
We can ask if they wanna be part of it, I guess.
As I've said before, I think the way to do it and the appropriate way to do it, and council, if you care to chime in, feel free.
So we can't make our own committee
You
on
can-
the
For sure we
zoning
can.
You
issue?
can make your own committee. You can't tell the commission what to do. You can make a recommendation or request from the commission, but you can't direct the commission to do something. You can't assign commissioners to it because you're a subservient board. So you can make a recommendation, you can make a request from the board, or you can just operate on what you're doing as a board individually and not involve the commissioners. You could request somebody from the commission possibly to come down, but you can't include the commission and tell them they need to be part of the committee because you don't have authority for that.
Right, that's what I was saying. If
Right.
if we say, okay, we're going to form a committee, and if we ask Chair Landine if she would be a part of the committee.
You can control the planning and zoning committee. I would leave out the commissioners unless you ask them to form the committee and then designate what the committee body is. You can do that. Otherwise, you just form it with planning and zoning members and leave it at that, because you control who would be on the committee from planning and zoning. But if you're gonna involve the commission, then you probably
Gonna
should go ahead
cross
and make a
over on
request.
boards, yeah.
And they would go ahead and, you can make a recommendation on who
Yeah.
you want, but it's a recommendation and a request, but it isn't telling them what the committee body is going to be.
Yep. Well,
So,
yeah, either way.
I'm all out of ideas then.
I guess I like Commissioner Johnson's original motion.
I would suggest you do one of two things. You either make the request of the type of committee you want and who you would like on it, make the request to the commission, and that we can put it on the agenda for the 28th, and then they can approve that from there or deny it, depending on what the commission wants to do. Or you decide to take a vote now, form your own committee, decide who's on that committee out of this board, and then you operate from that committee. Those are the two things I would suggest that you do, because both those things are within your control.
Mhm. Oh, we still have a motion that we need to.
I would like to rescind my motion.
Okay,
I'll second your rescission.
okay, should we vote on the rescission? Johnson,
Yes.
Jongling,
Yes.
Instead,
Yes.
Green,
Yes.
Scott,
Yes.
Landine. Yes. Hogan's yes. All right, so
So currently, we have no motions
So,
on the floor or anything.
so we either vote on making our own committee, or we make a motion and recommend who we would like, and they can either accept or deny. I can't make the recommendation, so.
I'm thinking.
I will make a motion that we recommend the Board of County Commissioners to create a committee to review this, and I would encourage them to include members of planning and zoning. But I would encourage the Board of Commissioners to create the committee.
Second, Green.
Any discussion?
I think I've said my piece on this, but I'm sorry. You can-
No, go ahead. You were first.
I do think that's where this belongs. I do think this is a county issue. I do believe that the county commissioners will invite individuals from planning and zoning. So, we are appointed by them, so I feel like we are the subject matter experts for the county on this. And because of that, I will support the motion. So thank you for making it, Jerry.
No, I'm just gonna agree with Commissioner Green that, but I would encourage, hopefully the commissioners, reach out and include some of the planning, commission and planning office in this, as I feel like it's both places is where it's gotta be made, and so hopefully that's the direction they'll take.
Anybody else? All right, we'll make a roll call. Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Jongling?
Yes.
Instead?
Yes.
Green?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Landine?
Yes.
Hogan is a no. All right, it passes. The commission will make the committee. Okay, next is the update and a review of the Board of Commissioners action items.
I'll be brief. So there was one item from the last meeting, and that was the conditional use permit for the milk condensing plant. That application was appealed, and so that appeal hearing will be at the next commission meeting, which is on April 25th. One other quick thing that I wanted to point out, more important, is that we did have the kickoff for the comprehensive plan meeting in Harrisburg and down here last couple weeks ago. And so that, the one that was down here is available on the website, so people want to get a kind of a background of where we're going with it. The other thing that I'd point out is that we're going to have stakeholder meetings coming up in the next few weeks. And so if anyone's interested in being a stakeholder or participating in the meetings, please contact our office, shoot us an email. We can put you on the contact list for that. But more importantly, there is a survey that is associated with the comprehensive plan. That survey is available on the county website. We're getting a lot of good responses on that. We'll make that available to the public, all those responses and all of the data with it. But we encourage you to still continue to take the survey because it is available. But with that, that's all I had. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks, Toby.
All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, Green.
Yay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 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 aye.